Tanse, hello to wow. Welcome to Eagle Heart Manifestation. My name is Eagle Heart Woman, and behind me, I haven't mentioned her for a few episodes, is my great grandmother Victoria Calahoo, who first taught me about herbs and plants and the actual medicine world of my Indigenous people, the Cree people here in Alberta, Canada. So, the last episode, I told you that I was off to the mountains and I'm back now. And I totally would like to say that in my mind, the sky is my roof and dirt and rocks are my floor. Now, I would have taken video when I was in the mountains, but of course, I did not charge my phone, so I could only take stills. But I think that you will be amazed at where we walked. I did go high in the mountains and put down tobacco for you, prayers that you are living in abundance and come to know yourself as true spirit and that you are happy and that you're well. So as I walked through Canyon, it's a beautiful valley full of waterfalls and they're all streaming down from the rock cliffs. It was a sacred place to the people of the mountains back before the newcomers came. But in January, all of that water is absolutely frozen, except for one curtain of waterfalls you'll see against a rock. But there were hanging icicles. The sun was glinting off of them. It was absolutely, they just looked like swords of fantasy, all of these icicles hanging down. So, where my thoughts went was a quote from a major teacher who said, and I will quote and read, that our main delusion is our conviction that there are causes other than our own consciousness. We believe that physical reality is hard, fixed, and rigid, when in fact, physical reality is only frozen thought. So those falls were frozen and, were not moving and not fluid. But when the cold is taken away, they begin to flow and nurture the land. So that's my analogy as to what reality really is when we get in the flow with our minds, with our imagination. We make it flow. We can bend it to our liking, to what we want. And it is our imagination that the creator gave us to imagine that it's already happened and live from the end that will make our reality, and how we can really treat physicality like water and not a frozen icicle that's unbendable and that we can have no influence on. Melt it, just let it flow with your mind and with your thoughts. So, speaking of thoughts, I used to have attack thoughts. I am a writer and I have been a potter. And I would say about, even as recent as 10 years ago, if somebody achieved something, like had a book published or did something else that I was involved in or liked to think that I was good at, I would have immediate attack thoughts and be jealous of them and probably and put down what they had done, like probably, oh, this book is probably terrible, probably wouldn't want to read it anyway. In reality, or really, I've come to understand that I if I because I wasn't measuring up in my own mind. And then I started to think to myself, who is measuring me? Who is making me live up to this standard? And it just all fell away. All of that striving, all of that needing to prove myself. The only one I needed to prove to myself, the only one I needed to prove myself to is myself, was myself. And once I realized that, Oh, I cannot tell you the stress that it took off of me. Really, the only reason that we're here is because we need to awaken our spiritual selves. Once God, wake up to what and who you really are. You are pure spirit. And if you can hold, I'd like to read this again because I wrote it down up in the mountains. If you can hold loving thoughts and conduct loving actions, you attract and manifest love in all aspects of your life. Be kind, be curious, and not judgmental, because we are all one. To think of thoughts as always being high and catching yourself when you're starting to be jealous or be unworthy or doubt. I have a good example of this, and it is another story that happened in the mountains. And this was a couple summers ago. I was camping up in the mountains, and I had just bought a new car, and it was bright blue, the color of my. It is. I still have it. It's bright turquoise, and it stands out. But I had gone. We were camping, my brother and I had gone to the washroom with my keys and apparently left them in the washroom, the ladies' washroom. So when I got back to my vehicle and went to open it, I didn't have keys. And I didn't know that I had left them in the washroom. So I was starting to go into panic mode. We were about 100 kilometers away from any phones and no reception where we were. And I didn't know how I was going to get out of where we were. I couldn't even call my husband to drive hundreds of kilometers to bring me the other set of keys. But I caught myself and just told myself, I have the keys in my hand. I have the keys in my hand. And my brother was starting to say, oh, we better jump in the car and take off to the nearest town and find a phone booth and call Rick, my husband. But I kept the faith, and I just knew that I didn't have to go anywhere, that those keys would be in my hand. Well, about half an hour later, the ranger was coming around the corner and doing his rounds. Probably, I guess he was like the park manager, and he was emptying garbage and collecting the campsite fees. And he stuck his hand out of his window as he came around the corner, and he beeped. He was obviously touching something, and my car beeped. And so he said, I found these in the women's washroom. I hardly ever go in there, but there was something that I needed to go in there and do. And these had fallen uh, behind the sink and onto the floor. And I had noticed your turquoise car when I drove around earlier. And I just had a feeling that these are probably yours. But I've been going around past cars and pushing the key so that pushing the fob to see if a car would respond with a horn honk. And sure enough, when I came around the corner and pointed at yours, these are your keys. And he just handed them over to me. And of course, didn't have to go anywhere. I had them in my hands, and before I got worried, I thought I could have dropped them anywhere in the bush. They could have still been sitting there rusting, but I kept the faith. And I do think that we can bring about the best results if we keep our thoughts high in the highest realm. So, do you doubt yourself? Is it like your inner being is just your greatest, you know, cheerleader, but your mind is always doubting and saying that you're a failure, saying that you can't really do things? Again, coming back to the mountain analogy, there are peaks and valleys, and sometimes you make it right up to the summit without hardly any effort at all. Sometimes you almost make it, and sometimes you can't even get near the top of the mountain. But persist. Keep up with those affirmations. I am perfect, whole, happy, abundant, consistent. I will put a beautiful affirmation in the comments. And I know, I'm sorry, I've been forgetting to put links. So I'll put a link to my book, a link to the beautiful Mohegan tobacco that I showed you yesterday, and a link to, or I will put in or in the info below this video, this wonderful affirmation. And you say, I am abundant. I am lovable, because then you own it. I guess it's biblical. It's like, I am the all that there is, and there is no other. Your consciousness is all that there is, and that's all that really matters. So why not be your own best friend? Why not flood that mind, that brain, with thoughts about how wonderful life is, about how much love is around you? And as you do it over and over again, that idea sinks into your subconscious mind and then flowers out into the world as that which you are desiring. Now, there's a whole scientific reason for why the subconscious mind does create this world, and I will explain that in the next video. But right now, we're talking about mountains. So get out every day, be communal in your world. I have another story about a girlfriend I had named Beverly, and she fell into a deep depression back when we were both about 25. And she was an excellent photographer. So I was trying to figure out how to get her out of her funk. So I made up this, well, I didn't make it up. I just asked if she would come to the mountains, come on a hike with me, and show me how to do some photography. And she didn't want to. She put me off for about 2 weeks and then finally agreed. And we did, quite an easy hike, but it was beautiful. We went past a couple turquoise lakes that were, just sparkling in the sun. And it totally rejuvenated me. And I could tell that she was smiling a bit more by the end of the hike. And then within the next month or two, she had gone on to hike a few more times on her own and with her husband. And those mountains, which are so powerful, my people often go up high into the mountains because we feel we're close to Creator, and do our affirmations and sing our prayers. The spirit of the mountain is just something that's indescribable unless you take yourself up there or get outside into the world. And as you find yourself going back into those old worn out thoughts that are playing like an old record over and over again, stop and come back into the present moment. Come back into, and the Cree word is Sohkisowin. Sohkisowin, which means strong mind. Practice it. Be in the moment. Come back into the moment whenever you're feeling like you're straying off into those attack thoughts that are aimed at yourself. Be your own best friend. And if you have to come back into the moment by having a cup of tea, if you have to come back into the moment by having a cup of tea, going outside, standing near a tree, I'm going to talk about mountains this time, but I'm going to say trees are our best friends. So go find a tree, feel its bark, and put your head against that tree. You will absolutely feel better. And ask that tree to drain your negative thoughts from your forehead out into the trunk of the tree and down into Mother Earth, because she is so vast that she can handle it. And I had one more point, and that is one more story about an elder and the mountains. And it's a magical story. This story goes back to probably the mid-1980s, and it took place in mountains that are near Banff in the Rocky Mountains, at a community called Morley, which is a a Nakota Sioux community reserve, First Nation reserve. And the ecumenical conference was where Indigenous elders came together with church people, people from the Baha'i faith, and for 4 days it was just sharing thought, and basically that there are many ways up the mountain to the highest vibration, to the highest being, creator. And those would be the different thoughts in the different religions and the people who gathered there. So for a few years, this ecumenical conference hadn't been held. And then one spring, lightning killed 4 buffalo. So the community at Morley kept a paddock of buffalo who just could range along the foothills of the mountains. And when the lightning killed 4 buffalo, Chief John Snow decided that that was the Creator's way of saying, we should begin this sacred gathering again, or this ecumenical conference, because 4 buffalo have been chosen by the Creator to be offerings, and 4 is a very sacred number. So one ecumenical conference, when it started happening again, Albert Lightning, one of the elders in my book, came to the conference. And this story is told by Perry, his son, who said that morning, or I think it was the morning of the second day of the new iterations, the restart of the ecumenical conference, his father, Albert, got up really early and was rummaging around in the lodge. He had a beautiful teepee. I think I'll run a picture of that as well. He had a teepee with 2 white buffalo. And I will tell you in another episode about the story of the white buffalo calf woman when she came to the Sioux people. So there are 2 white buffalo on either side of the teepee door, and around it are white buffalo or brown buffalo, and then a beautiful sun and stripes leading right up to the top of the teepee. So that morning, Perry heard his father rummaging around and noticed that he had grabbed his pipe bag and his backpack. And he nodded to Perry, and Perry knew that he should follow him. So they walked along the road where everybody was camped on either side. And Perry said his father went to the pole gate of the buffalo paddock. And off in the distance, the buffalo, it was very early, they were grazing. And his father just kind of dipped below 2 rungs of the pole fence and put his pipe bag down and rummaged into his backpack for a braid of sweetgrass. He lit it, and then he took his pipe out and put it together and held it to his heart, and he sang a song. And Perry was amazed that it looked like the bull buffalo put up his head and started to walk toward Albert Lightning. And Perry started to get very afraid for his father. He might have been trampled. He could have been gored by this massive buffalo. But the buffalo came forward, and about 10 other buffalo kind of formed a semicircle around Albert. Albert took a fresh braid of sweetgrass from his bag and held it out, and the bull buffalo came forward and actually took it from his hand and nibbled on it. And Perry said the 2 regarded each other, looked at each other, and his grandfather's name is Buffalo Child. Albert's name is Buffalo Child. So there was a bond, there was a spiritual bond between 2 spirits standing before Perry. So I'll just leave you with, again, another magical story. There are miracles happening all around us. And open your eyes and see them, and to continue to affirm that your life is a miracle. It's the best it could be. And ask yourself, how good can it get? Thank you for listening. I would like to say Kinan Skomitin. Hi, hi. See you again.